Russian and Ukrainian delegations have arrived in Istanbul for a second round of peace talks. Both sides will present documents outlining their ceasefire demands. The meeting is still going ahead despite Ukraine destroying 40 Russian bomber planes in a large-scale drone attack on Russian airbases on Sunday. This video appears to show the attack as drones were launched from inside Russia. President Zelensky says Operation Spiderweb took more than a year and a half to plan and described this as absolutely brilliant. The scale of the operation is vast, with the strikes hitting at least 4 different airfields from Western Russia, Moscow, and reaching the country's far east, thousands of miles from Ukraine. Russia's defense ministry has said it shot down 162 Ukrainian drones fired overnight after Ukraine launched attacks on Russia's Kursk region that borders Ukraine. Our correspondents Paul Adams in Kiev and Hugo Bashega in Istanbul have been looking at the details of this latest round of Ukrainian strikes and what impacts they might have on any prospective peace deal.
We only have an account from Ukrainian sources on how this was conducted, and they obviously want to present a narrative, but it's a pretty astonishing narrative. The idea that scores of drones were smuggled into Ukraine, loaded into pallets, then put aboard trucks that were then driven, possibly by unsuspecting drivers, to these air bases across the breadth of Russia, where the drones were then launched remotely, one by one, and able to target those aircraft sitting on the tarmac. This is an astonishing feat of intelligence and organization, which, as the Ukrainians have said, has taken a long time to plan and execute, and is clearly designed, and would have been designed even a year and a half ago when they first came up with this idea, to tell Russia and the world that Ukraine is not finished, that it is not necessarily on the back foot. It may be losing territory inch by inch in the east of Ukraine, but that it is still capable of delivering heavy blows at the heart of Russia's military machine.
And a message not only to Russia, you say to the rest of the world, and importantly to the US as well, ahead of these peace talks.
Yes, if people will remember the infamous encounter between President Zelensky and Donald Trump in the Oval Office earlier this year, in which Donald Trump said to President Zelensky that he had no cards to play. Well, in the wake of what happened yesterday, Ukraine is awash with internet memes showing President Zelensky dressed in a suit of cards, or as the king of drones, as he's been dubbed in one social media post. In other words, that the Ukrainians have become frustrated with the notion that somehow this is a country staring defeat in the face and willing to sue for peace at any price. It is saying to Washington, no, that is not the case. Do not work on the assumption that we are simply going to roll over and accept whatever peace you, the United States, are able to extract from Russia. We have a say in this process too.
Well, let's bring in Hugo Bashega, who's live for us in Istanbul. And Hugo, how are these strikes likely to impact this next round of peace talks there?
Well, I think it's very interesting because, as Paul was saying, this sends a message not only to Russia but also to the US and other Western allies that Ukraine is still fighting, it hasn't been defeated, and it is not going to be forced to accept major concessions to strike a deal. I think here in Istanbul, few people are expecting a breakthrough because Russia and Ukraine remain far apart in these negotiations. Ukraine has demanded an unconditional ceasefire in these talks, which has been rejected by Russia. And I think a lot of people are questioning, Russia's real intentions here in these talks. The Ukrainians say that Russia is not really interested in pausing the conflict, in ending the war. We've seen that in recent weeks. Russia has actually intensified its air strikes on Ukraine. And Ukrainian officials also say that there have been indications that Russia is planning a summer offensive to try to seize even more Ukrainian territory, and they have been accusing President Putin of delaying tactics, of stalling for time in these negotiations, and of not really being interested in striking a deal. And there may be a reason for that, because both countries are under pressure from President Trump to reach a deal. The Ukrainians obviously need American military support. They want to stop the violence in the country, and Russia is interested in the easing of economic sanctions. So that may be the reason why they are engaging in these negotiations, and many suspect they're not really interested in striking a deal here.
Little hope of progress there in Istanbul, Hugo, but do we know who's actually going to be in the room for these talks and what might be on the agenda?
Yeah, so the Russian delegation is being led by a top Kremlin official, and the Ukrainian team is being led by the Ukrainian defense minister. We haven't had, the terms of the Russian, demands made public. And we know that in recent weeks, Russian officials have continued to voice those demands that have already been rejected multiple times by the Ukrainians, such as a limit to the size of the Ukrainian military, also recognition of Ukrainian territory that has been seized by Russia, including Crimea. And the Ukrainians again are saying that they want a ceasefire now, unconditional ceasefire, before they can discuss, terms of a long-term deal for this conflict, which again has been rejected by Russia.